Certainly in the area of forensics, the term gold standard is used quite a lot, as we were subject, the DNA testing community in forensics was subject to sort of early scrutiny into to the profession or the area.
Okay. And DNA can be very hardy also. You said that it could disappear, but it also could be very hardy in that you can find it 10 years from now on an object, right?
I don't believe I said it could disappear, but yes, I do agree with that. It is very hardy, especially if stored properly. DNA is very hardy and can yield results decades after it's deposited.
Right, even more than 10 years, decades after it's deposited.
Absolutely.
And you talked about several different types of DNA, and you talked about touch and handler DNA. Now, handler DNA is if I pick up this pen, I've handled it, right?
Correct.
Okay. It's not from my blood or anything like that. It's from my skin cells or my sweat that is shedding the skin cells, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And if I touch something, touch means I've just been here. I touch it. I'm not handling it, but I'm touching it. Like I'm touching this lectern, correct?
Correct. They're sort of loose terms that are used to try to sort of define categories, but they're obviously, the line between touch and handle could be defined differently in different labs, for example. But yes, generally handler DNA is sort of a term, at least in our laboratory, something extensively handled, and touch would be like a single touch or just a couple of times.
Okay, but you don't necessarily use a different testing regime on it for touch or handler DNA. You use the same kits that are commercially available.
That is correct. Occasionally we may sample less DNA or less like swab, depending on the type of sample, but in general, yes, they go through the same steps of DNA testing, okay. Absolutely.
And then you mentioned something called low copy DNA. Now that's not anything to do with me handling this pen or me touching the lectern. That's something totally different, correct? That's how you get DNA from an object.
It's a DNA testing methodology versus how did the DNA get on the object,
right.
Correct?
Right, and there are kits that are used, such as Mini Filer, right? You're aware of the Mini Filer testing kit?
Yes, that is an amplification kit that can be used on handler or non-handler type items.
Okay,
yeah.
Your lab does not use it?
Correct.
Okay, your lab only uses the one kit, correct?
That's correct.
But it's a valid kit that's used by other labs, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you're aware of other labs that are ASCOT certified, ASCOT accredited that even use low copy DNA, correct?
I am aware of other ASCOT lab accredited laboratories that use low copy. That's correct.
Okay. So all these are acceptable testing methods, whether you use the identifiler plus PCR amplification kit or the Mini Filer Applied Biosystems kit. These are just various kits that different labs use, correct?
That's right, and the acceptability is, I guess, more along the lines of the application or how that laboratory validated it and determined the interpretation and use of those kits. But the kits
they're
themselves,
common kits. There's nothing unusual about them.
Oh, right. They're very common kits, commercially available.
And as again, we said, ASCLAD labs all across the country that you're aware of use a variation of these kits. They don't have to use Identifiler. They can use Mini Filer, correct?
Yes, they do. But low copy is used in a smaller subset of laboratories, but the kits themselves can be used for low copy or sort of standard testing.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to clear that up because we talk about it all the time, but maybe a little confusing for those that don't know the difference between low copy and handler and touch DNA. All right, so let's move on to a different area.
Do they have anything to do with one another?
Low copy. So the low copy methodology is the additional cycles that I described.
When you say methodology, do you mean the means by which you seek to develop a profile?
Yes, within the laboratory, yes.
So it's the testing, it's not the way in which DNA is left on something.
Absolutely.
Okay. Counsel?
Okay, thank you. And again, you're aware that there are ASCII certified labs that use low copy DNA as a methodology that's accepted in the scientific community.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, all right. Now, moving on to the specifics of this matter, when you received the swab, 13.1 was it, in your lab? It was
The item number,
item number
correct,
13.1. That was a swab that had been, it was just one swab, correct?
That is correct.
And that swab had been from 3 different areas of the gun together?
It was multiple areas. I'm not exactly sure of the exact number, but it was multiple textured areas of the revolver.
Okay, so the swab didn't say it came from taking the revolver apart and testing it, right?
Did not say that.
And when you swab one swab for multiple areas, you're more likely to get a mixed sample, as you did, correct?
Not necessarily. If there's not more than one person on the gun, you're not going to have a mixed sample. But in our laboratory, we do one swab because it is like what we typically see is we get a very small amount of DNA, and so we're trying to consolidate all the DNA from those textured areas into one swab so that we can have the most DNA available to test.
Okay, but if you swab from 3 different areas, if there had been someone's DNA, for instance, on the grip and someone's DNA on the hammer, that swab would then combine them, correct?
If there were 2 different donors of DNA on that, those 2 different areas, yes, it would combine the DNA. And again, it would have to be a detectable amount from each of those 2 people.
And in fact, you found 2 separate donors on that gun.
We found a very low level apparent mixed sample. So our conclusion was that there was at least 2 people within the DNA that we detected.
Okay. Now, one of the other things went to something you spoke to the prosecution about was your credentials. And they're massive, I would say. But one of the things I see is you did take courses in things such as basic blood stain pattern analysis, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So in your attempt to further your education in the crime laboratory area, you took courses recognizing the various areas to interpret evidence, one of them being DNA, for instance, and one being blood stain pattern analysis.
Sorry, was there a question?
Yes.
Yes, I've taken courses in multiple areas related to my job function. So for bloodstain pattern analysis, as I mentioned in the beginning of my testimony, responding to crime scenes and identifying and collecting evidence is part of my job description. So the bloodstain pattern analysis course that I attended, actually 2 courses that I attended, would be as part of that job function.
Okay, and I think I asked you, but just bear with me for one moment, you do not know whether or not this gun was taken apart to get the samples from DNA?
I don't know if it was taken apart.
Okay, you don't have any idea, you just get the swab and process it?
Correct.
Okay, now, you were very careful when you processed it, correct?
Yes.
You wanted to make sure the results were not contaminated, correct?
Yes, we have extensive protocol to prevent and identify any contamination should it occur.
And with all the carefulness and the processing that you did on this swab, nothing that you did connected that swab of that gun to Aaron Hernandez, correct?
So the profile that we obtained was not able to be used for comparison, so we aren't able to draw any conclusions related to any individuals brought to us for comparison.
And therefore, you can't conclude that Aaron Hernandez ever handled that gun?
We cannot conclude that ever.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further, Commonwealth?
No.
Thank you. Commonwealth.
Commonwealth calls Marilyn Ramos.
Swear this way. Start right here, you're gonna raise the right hand, you'll face the left.
You solemnly swear the testimony you should give this court and jury and the issue now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant at the bar shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Kindly call the officer.
Right this way.
Mr. Hagan.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to ladies and gentlemen of the jury and spell your last name for the record?
Ramos,
That's your last name. What's your first name, ma'am?
Marilyn,
Can you spell that too, just for the court reporter?
Marilyn.
How old are you, ma'am?
47.
And are you employed?
Yes.
What type of work do you do?
I work for a nonprofit agency.
And ma'am, calling attention to where you live, not the specific address right now, but what city or town do you live in?
Bristol, Connecticut.
How long have you lived in Bristol, Connecticut?
10 years.
I'm calling your attention now to a photograph I'll put on the screen. It should be in front of you, Exhibit 211. Do you recognize the young woman depicted in that photo?
My daughter.
That's your daughter?
Yes.
Her name is what, ma'am?
Jailene Diaz.
And how old is your daughter, Jailene?
She's 23.
Do you have any other children?
Yes.
How many children do you have?
I have 2.
Other than Jailene, who is the other child you have, a boy or a girl?
A girl.
And what is her name? How old is she?
Luz Diaz. She's 24.
You mentioned to your daughter, Jailene. Where did Jailene grow up?
She grew up in New Britain, and then we moved to Bristol
When, if you recall, did you move to Bristol?
in 2007.
And how old was she in 2007?
She was in middle school.
Okay. So when you moved to Bristol in 2007, did you move to a particular neighborhood?
Yes, where I currently live.
So you're still in the same neighborhood?
Yes.
Calling your attention now to placing on the screen Exhibit 224. Do you recognize the person depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
Who is that?
John.
John? Do you know John's last name?
Acorn.
Alcorn?
Alcorn. Yes.
And do you know any nicknames that John Alcorn goes by?
Chicago.
Chicago? And when was the first time that you met John Alcorn?
Probably after I moved in 2007, around that time.
And when you moved there in 2007 with your daughter Jailene and with Luz as well, your husband was living with you as well, is that correct?
Yes.
And calling your attention now to John Alcorn, where did he live in relation to where your house was?
He lived further down. I don't recall the number, but it was further down.
But close by though?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you notice starting in middle school about the relationship between John Chicago Alcorn and your daughter Jailene?
They were friends. They used to hang out together and go
How-
to school together.
So did they go to school together all the way from middle school through high school?
I believe so.
And when you said they hung out together, would they hang out together in your neighborhood?
Yes.
Did they go over each other's houses?
Yes.
And I'm calling your attention now to 2013, the summer of 2013. Your daughter Jailene, do you know, what was she doing at that point? Had she finished school?
I believe so.
And do you know whether or not she was still friendly with Chicago?
Yes.
And did you see them frequently hanging out together in that time period?
Yes.
And did they see each other most every day?
Every other day.
Every other day?
Yeah.
Now, at some point, ma'am, I'm calling your attention now to June 21st, the year 2013. You may not remember the exact date, but the date that Jailene had a car accident. Do you remember that date?
Yes.
And based upon a phone call you received, did you go to any particular place, a hospital?
Yes.
Which hospital did you go to, ma'am?
It was in Massachusetts. I don't recall the name.
Would St. Mary's sound familiar? If you know.
I don't recall the name.
When you went to the hospital, who did you see there?
My daughter.
Your daughter Jailene?
Yes.
Was your other daughter Luz with you as well?
Yes.
And what about any nieces that you have? In particular, a niece by the name of Yesenia Mejia. Do you know her?
Yes.
And what is the relationship? Meaning, is she a niece by your brother, your sister, your in-laws?
She's related to me by, through my sister-in-law.
And was Yesenia at the hospital as well?
Yes,
Were you present when Massachusetts State Police troopers spoke to your daughter?
I was not present. I was outside the door.
At some point, were you present when your daughter was let out by Massachusetts State Police troopers? And then she was placed under arrest?
Yes.
And did you have, without stating what was said, did you have conversations with your daughter, or did she say anything to you as she left?
No.
Did you hear her say anything to the troopers as she left?
Well, you may answer that yes or no.
Did you hear anything being stated? Not what it was, the content, but did you hear her saying anything to the troopers?
Yes.
And based upon what you heard, did you make any efforts to reach out to anybody you knew from the neighborhood?
No.
Did you hear any nicknames mentioned?
I don't recall.
Add one moment.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. I have no further questions.
Mr. Diaz.
May it please the court, Mr. Hagan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
My name's Jose Baez. We've never spoken, correct?
Yes.
I've just got a few questions about your daughter and what you just testified to.
Okay.
Jailene's okay, right?
Yes.
Okay. Hasn't left Bristol or anything like that?
No, she's still in Bristol.
Okay. She's not in the hospital or anything like that?
No.
Okay, so she's fully able to come to court if called upon?
Yes.
Okay. Now, are you aware if Jailene went to high school with a man by the name of Jamar Durham?
No.
Okay. Now, do you know a gentleman by the name of Noor Smart?
No.
Okay. Your daughter has a child, correct?
Yes.
What's the name of the father?
Andre Smart.
Oh, sorry, I got his name wrong.
Okay.
Mr. Smart. And do you know if Mr. Smart knows a gentleman by the name of Alexander Bradley? If the witness knows, Your Honor.
I will see you at sidebar. Mr. Baez, please.
Yes, sir. I wanted to ask you something. I'm going to ask you about another topic, if I may. Back to Jailene. Have you seen or been made aware of any type of harassment that Jailene may be going through from law enforcement?
Sustained in that form.
Have you seen or been present and seen any type of intimidation being placed on your daughter by law enforcement in this case?
No, overruled.
Can you repeat the question?
Have you seen or become aware somehow of, well, let me rephrase it. Have you seen any type of intimidation by law enforcement on your daughter relevant to this case?
I haven't recalled. I haven't seen it.
Okay. Now, your daughter came into a significant amount of money a few years back. Is that correct?
Yes.
Overruled.
And approximately $800,000?
I'm not sure of the amount.
Okay. It was over $500,000, correct?
I was not aware of the amount.
Okay. But it was significant.
Yes.
Okay. And do you know if your daughter is involved in the marijuana trade in any way?
I'll see you inside, Barry. Mr. Diaz, please.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir, sorry. Excuse me, ma'am. I just had one last question. Have you become aware that your daughter used that money to become involved in the marijuana trade, or utilize some of that money for that?
She was not aware. She was not utilizing that money for any drug trafficking or
Okay.
things of that nature.
Is that money all gone now?
Yes.
Okay. And how long ago did she get that?
I believe it was in 2012.
2012. Okay. Just a moment, I don't think I have further questions. No further questions, thank you.
Just one
One more?
Mr. Ramos, Mr. Byers just asked you a question on cross-examination about your daughter having a child, is that correct?
Yes.
And who cares for that child?
While her mom is at work and I'm at work, the baby goes to daycare.
And then what about, do you ultimately take care of the child?
Yes. If when she's at work, I take care of the baby.
All right, thank you, ma'am. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ramos. Can we step down, please? Watch your step. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Bias? Something on child care?
No, I just have one last brief question, if I may. Ms. Ramos, Bristol, Connecticut is a very small town, is correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that it's approximately 60,000 people total? Does that sound fair?
Maybe. I can't agree because I don't know the numbers.
And there's a very small African American and Hispanic community. Wouldn't you agree?
Do you know that to be the case?
I don't know that.
You don't know.
Okay. There are only 2 projects in that area, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Are you aware of the Hispanic and African American communities within Bristol?
Not very much.
Okay. No further questions.
Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Ramos. Now give it a try.
All right, thank you.
Watch your step, please. Commonwealth.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth calls Christopher Ritchell.
That's what it's So we're gonna start right here, you're gonna raise your right hand and face it back.
Sir, do you solemnly swear that testimony you shall give this court and jury in the issue now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant at the bar shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, sir.
Right this way, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Christopher Ritchell, Ritchell.
And sir, how are you employed?
I work for AT&T,
And what is your current title at AT&T?
radio frequency engineer.
What is a radio frequency engineer and what are your duties and responsibilities, sir?
I design, implement, and maintain the cellular network here in New England.
For the entire area of New England?
For the New England market, yes.
Sir, I want to call your attention back to how you started in this field, so to speak. When did you first become involved in either cellular telephones or even the predecessors to cellular telephones that some of us remember, car phones?
Once upon a time I started in 1984 installing car phones. And then subsequently just kept going through training and schooling and have worn many different hats for AT&T over the years.
Well, let me start with the predecessor, so to speak, to AT&T. Calling your attention out to 1986 for a company that some may recall called Cellular Services of Boston. Did you work for them?
Yes, sir.
What did you do for them in 1986?
I installed car phones and repaired them at the same time.
Calling your attention out to 1990, a company named Cellular One. Did you work for them?
Yes, sir.
And what did you do for Cellular One?
Cellular One, basically the same thing. Installing car phones, repairing them, customer service.
Calling your attention now to something a little more relevant to what we're talking about today. 1997, did you work for a company called Singular Wireless?
Yes, yes, sir.
In 1997, sir, was that about the time period phones first kind of were developed and used, that time period?
Yeah, around the late 90s is when we started bringing cell phones in building. We started lighting up tunnels and schools and hospitals, and that was my primary focus then, was to bring the cellular signal inside.
And what did you do to help get that done?
I would use repeaters. We'd actually put cell sites within the building themselves and install antennas inside the rooms. It was mainly at the beginning for hospitals so that the physicians could use their hospitals without worrying about injuring, harming the equipment or patient equipment.
And calling your attention now to 2001, did you continue your work for Singular, but in a different capacity?
Yes, 2001. I was still, I've been doing, like I said, I wear many different hats, so I've always been in the in-building portion.
Now you say in-building, what does that mean for those of us who aren't in the industry?
Designing in-building cellular systems. For example, the tunnels, the Big Dig. That was my project, where we got the signal inside that wouldn't reach it from the outside. So we had to bring the signal in.
And calling attention now to AT&T, did Singular Wireless basically either become AT&T or get bought out by them?
Yes. We merged with AT&T. Singular actually bought AT&T, but I think AT&T would like to think it went the other way. But yes, we ended up becoming AT&T.
And have you worked for AT&T from 2004 until the present day?
Yes, sir.
So well over 13 years about, is that correct?
I'm in my 26th year.
And you've indicated, sir, that you're actually an engineer, is that correct?
Yes.
And you've indicated, I believe, that you helped design and implement and build cellular networks, is that correct?
Correct.
Sir, if you would, can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in as basic terms as possible, how does a cellular phone work to make a call or to send a text or to get data? And in particular, how is the use of cell towers done to accomplish that?
Well, your phone is nothing more than really just a glorified two-way radio. It sits in an idle state, waiting to be used, waiting to either make a phone call or receive a phone call. When that happens, when you hit the send button on your phone, it connects to most of the times it's the closest site. The quality of the call also is taken into that consideration. So the call is routed to the closest cell site. From there, it goes over through a switching department, and ultimately the call is routed to its final destination.
And you indicated an example with a phone call. If one uses one's cell phone to send a text, does it follow essentially the same course that you've just described?
Yes, sir.
And what about when one tries to use data? In other words, using your cell phone to open up an app or to check a website. What's the process? Is it the same?
It is the exact same thing. It's just slightly different from voice and data. But I'm not going to bore you with the complications of it.
Now, what about the aspect of you being a radio frequency engineer? In other words, are there different frequencies for different cell carriers?
Yes. The FCC allocates bands, frequency bands, to be used within the cellular companies, and each cellular company uses different frequencies.
Now, we've talked a little bit about, sir, you said cell towers, and I think in answer to one of my questions, you said the call or the text or the data will go, generally speaking, go to the closest tower. What are towers, and how are they located throughout the greater New England area?
Well, it depends. In an urban situation like a downtown Boston, we would have many different cell sites. Tall buildings can refract the signal, so it helps to have multiple cell sites on an urban setting rather than just one site that covers a vast area like you would find out in rural parts of the country.
And what does a cell site or cell tower look like? In other words, are they all the big towers that everyone's probably seen on the side of the road, or sometimes are they camouflaged or a little smaller?
They can be camouflaged, look like trees. I've seen them look like rocks. Generally, they are on towers, but now you'll see small little antennas hanging off the sides of buildings, and usually they're painted to match the facade of the building.
Sir, I want to call your attention now to the type of data that's collected by AT&T relative to customers' use of cell phones. Can you describe what type of data is captured? In other words, every time someone uses their cell phone, is there certain data that's registered and collected by AT&T?
Every time you make a cell phone call or a text message or a data session, AT&T captures all of that information for billing purposes. So when you get your bill, all of that is encompassed in there.
So that information is kept in the ordinary course of business by AT&T for billing purposes?
Yes, sir.
Additionally, sir, is that data also kept in the ordinary course of business by AT&T for network reliability reasons or for troubleshooting?
Yes. Yes. I will use call records. If a customer calls in and reports they've had a negative experience, maybe some drop calls or a particular area they just have lousy service, I'll use the call records to then try to figure out why they're having such a negative experience and where, and then I can narrow it down to maybe the cell site is having a problem, or it could be a number of different things. But yeah, we use the cell records for that as well.
Now, sir, as the senior engineer, I believe you said, covering the whole New England region, have you had the opportunity to testify in court before and provide what's oftentimes referred to as opinion evidence relative to cellular phone use or radio frequencies?
Opinion, say that again, I'm sorry?
Well, opinion testimony relative to how cellular phones work and how that information is captured by AT&T.
Yes.
And in addition, sir, are you also designated as a keeper of the records relative to AT&T?
Correct. Yes, sir.
So we're going to call your attention now to information or work that you've had a chance to review relative to this particular investigation. Is it fair to state, sir, that various and numerous cellular phones were requested, information on cellular phones was requested pursuant to this investigation by the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office?
Yes, that is correct.
And is it fair to state, sir, that that was obtained both by what's referred to as administrative subpoenas to AT&T as well as search warrants?
Yes.
And sir, I'm calling your attention now to a thumb drive. Have you had an opportunity to look at the contents of a thumb drive prior to testifying here today?
I have.
Airport witness, Ron.
You may.
So I'm forwarding you a thumb drive. You had a chance to look at the contents of that, sir?
I have, yes, sir.
And does that appear to, or doesn't, not that does that appear, but does that in fact contain various phone records that were subpoenaed by the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office of AT&T relative to this investigation?
Yes, sir.
And is it fair to state that there are numerous and voluminous cellular phone records contained on this thumb drive?
There are, yes.
And if you could give even a guesstimate, if these were to be printed out, would it be more than 1,000 pages?
It could be.
I believe without objection, I'd ask that the thumb drive containing the phone records requested pursuant to this investigation from AT&T be entered as the next numbered exhibit, subject to redaction.
Just wanted to advise the board, we have made an agreement with the state that's subject to redaction. And then Mr. Hagan and I discussed yesterday about perhaps composing something to make the presentation of evidence easier and more efficient. That we've yet to agree upon, but I just wanted to let the board aware of that. If that makes any sense.
Well, it may later. That'll be received as Exhibit 249. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just explain what subject or redaction means. It means there may be some information on the exhibit that really isn't relevant to anything, doesn't have any direct significance to the case, and the parties have agreed, let's get it into evidence now, and then we can clean it up. That is, we can edit it in some way to eliminate the irrelevant information outside of your presence. It's done to ensure that while you're here, you're receiving evidence and not sitting upstairs while counsel are trying to agree upon exhibits. So it is for your convenience and to assure the case moves as smoothly as possible. I thank counsel for working that out, and the thumb drive is Exhibit 249.
Your Honor, if I may I have marked, just for identification only, a one-page document that has the contents, the actual phone records that are contained on that thumb drive, at least as of now. Just for identification.
Mr. Bias, without objection for ID.
Without objection.
I apologize for stepping in, Judge. I was a party of that communication. Just wanted to advise the board.
This would be VV.
Yes, Your Honor.
So relative to Exhibit 249 that was just introduced, I'm going to ask you to look at some documentation that is contained on that thumb drive number 249, hopefully in a way that will go more smoothly before the jury. First, I'd like to call your attention to a document. Richard Windsor.
You may.
Showing you a two-page document, sir. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
What is that?
This is a legend for the AT&T mobility records, describing on what some of the prefixes that you might see on the data, on the records themselves.
And sir, we're about to go through the records and have you describe what everything means, but would this assist the jurors in case they forget what you say as far as what different things may mean on those records?
Yes.
I'm going to ask that this be introduced as Exhibit 249A.
I'm sorry, was that no objection?
Without objection.
Thank you, sir. Exhibit 249A.
Reverend Windsor.
You may.
So I'm going to show you a portion, a small portion of Exhibit 249. I'd ask you if you recognize that, sir.
Yes.
And what does that appear to be?
This is the subscriber financial liability sheet.
And does it have what appears to be records related to that same phone number attached to it? At least certain records.
Yes. So the phone number is 562-481-8106.
And is it fair to state, sir, that this is the cover sheet, the subscriber information for that particular number, and then is just a very small portion of those records for that cell phone that essentially starts on July 14th, 2012, and ends on or about July 21st, 2012?
That is correct.
For the record, Your Honor, these are pages 1 through 21, pages 108 through 115, and also pages 61 through 65. I would ask that this document be marked 249B.
Without objection?
Without objection.
Thank you. 249B.
So do you see the page of Exhibit 249B on the screen in front of you?
Yes.
And I believe you already testified, but if you could tell us this form labeled subscriber information, financially liable party, who's listed here, sir?
Aaron Hernandez.
And does it have certain identifying information as far as credit address, email as well? Is that correct, sir?
Got the address, customer since, the date that it was active, and then the, yes, there is an email address.
I want to call your attention now to what's entitled user information. First, the designation MSISDN. What does that mean?
That's the phone number. If you're going to ask me what the acronym is, I can't remember it off the top of my
Okay,
head.
I don't think we need to know that. Just the phone number is good. The IMSI number, sir, what is that?
The IMSI is the International Mobile Subscriber Information. That is the actual SIM card that goes into the phone. That contains the phone number, and it's linked to the financial liability, the folks responsible for paying the bill.
And is a SIM card unique? In other words, does each SIM card have its own unique IMSI number?
Yes.
And for those who may not know, a SIM card, is that the little device that goes into your phone?
Correct. It slides into the back of the phone, yes.
What's its purpose? What does it do?
That is the actual identity of the person using the phone itself.
Call your attention to what's labeled, listed just below it, IMEI number. What is that?
The IMEI is the International Mobile Equipment Identifier, and that is a 15-digit number that is unique to the handset itself. It's theoretically the fingerprint of a handset. No two handsets will have that same number.
And when you say handset, does that mean the cell phone itself?
The cell phone itself, yes, sir.
So even if one were to switch owners of the phone, would the IMEI number stay the same?
The IMEI will always stay with the handset itself, yes.
So that phone will always have that same designation, even if it's used by someone else or owned by someone else?
Correct.
What if it were brought up on another carrier provider of cellular service? Would it still have the same IMEI number?
It would, but the phone itself would have to be unlocked. When you when you get your phone through your carrier, the phone is generally locked specifically to that carrier itself, and generally can't be used on another network, but you can have it unlocked by some outside entity, and then it could be used on a different network.
So we're going to go to a particular page and just have you help us in being able to read these records and determine what they mean. Now, sir, is it fair to state that the document that I previously showed to you, exhibit number 249B, that is broken up into sections? In other words, are the records listed in any way as far as the type of data that's being reported, meaning phone calls, texts, and data?
Yes.
Those are separated?
They're broken up into voice calls, text messaging, and then data usage.
Just for now, focusing on voice calls or direct actual phone calls. I'm going to go to page 17 of what's been entered as exhibit 249B. I'm just going to focus now on entry number 389, and we'll just go from one end to the other and have you explain what all this means. First, starting with what I've underlined as 389. What is that, sir?
389 is the line item number in this particular report.
And calling your attention to the next line, which is here, which is labeled on the records as connection date. What does that mean, sir?
That is the actual date of the phone call itself.
And so this particular one, 389, the date of this phone call would be July 16th, 2012?
Correct.
And what's the next entry, sir?
The next entry is, it's 2:37 a.m. That's the time of the phone call itself.
And just to give the jurors some sense of what the terminology is that AT&T uses, that was labeled here as connection time?
Correct.
And is that in local time, sir, or is there some type of addition that has to be done?
No, that looks to be in Eastern Standard Time, in our local time.
Now, the next column is labeled as seizure time. What does that mean, sir?
Seizure time is the amount of time it takes when you hit the send button before you actually hear it ring in your ear.
And that's captured again in the ordinary course of business by AT&T?
Correct. In this instance, it was 13 seconds.
The next column is labeled as originating number. What does that refer to, sir?
This is the number that made the phone call. This is the outgoing number, 562-481-8106.
And is that the same number that we previously discussed, according to the subscriber page, was listed to Aaron Hernandez?
Yes, sir.
And the number being called, or I shouldn't say the number being called, let me go to the next column, the terminating number. What does that mean?
Terminating number is the person receiving the call, yes, the other party.
In this particular case, the person receiving the party would be what number, sir?
860-502-2593.
And the next column that says elapsed time, what does that mean, sir?
This is the actual time of the phone call itself, 17 seconds.
So that call only lasted 17 seconds?
Correct.
And it took 13 seconds to go through?
Yes, sir.
I'll call your attention to the next column, which is dialed number dialed. What does that mean?
These are the actual digits that were dialed from the phone itself.
What's the purpose of that? In other words, wouldn't you expect the number dialed to be the same as the terminating number?
Well, it depends if you have your phone forwarded, or, in some instances, maybe you would dial a pilot number, which would then forward to another phone number. That's just to show that which digits were actually dialed from the handset itself.
Call your attention now to the next column that's labeled as IMEI.
And that's the International Mobile Equipment Identifier that I spoke of, 15-character, unique to the handset itself.
So that's, again, unique to that cellular phone.
Correct.
Calling your attention now to the next column, IMSI number.
And the MC, that's the SIM card that we spoke about as well.
Calling your attention to what's labeled as description. Go to the same line that we're on before right here. Can you tell us what these letter designations mean? Capital M2 lowercase m _ DIR, all in caps. What does that mean?
The capital M indicates that it is an AT&T customer.
Making the call?
Making the call. The little m indicates that the other user is not an AT&T subscriber, some other subscriber, some other carrier. And then the DIR just means that it was a direct dialed.
And while we're on this screen, sir, we see some other different designations up above. So here we see VMC. What does that mean?
VMC is voice mailbox check. That is somebody checking their voicemail. And then a little lower you see VMB. That is somebody leaving a voicemail message.
I'm calling your attention to what appears to be the final columns. And I'll go up and show what that's labeled as. Cell location, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you tell us what these number designations mean relative to cell location?
Can we slide it over just a little bit more? It's because the end is cut off. The far right was cut off. There we go. Do you want to underline which one it is again? I'm sorry, I don't know which line item we're on.
Just for the record, this is the call you described as July 16th, 2012, 2:37 a.m., 13 seconds, originating number 562-481-8106, terminating number 860-502-2593. I believe you've already testified that it was a AT&T customer to a non-AT&T customer direct call.
Correct.
And tell us what all these numbers mean.
Okay, starting with the line that's right after the DIR, it says 06980. That is what's known as a location area code. The location area code identifies a group of cell sites within a cluster for a geographic area. For example, that 06980 just indicates that to us that it's New England. It's a New England market. The next set of numbers, the 22247, 2224 is the actual cell site designation itself. So site 2224 is the cell site. The number after it, the 7, indicates which face of the cell site handled the call. Now, a cell site is basically a pie, has 3 pieces. You've got a north, you've got a site that faces about 4 o'clock, and you've got a site that faces about 7 o'clock, looking at a clock. Each face is 180 degrees, because it encompasses a 360-degree circle. So what the 7 tells me is a specific face on that site. So it would either be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that 7 tells me that it was the alpha face of that particular site.
And which way would the alpha face?
Alpha always faces due north in our market. The beta face would always point at about 4 o'clock on the clock, and then the gamma face would point about 7 o'clock. So southwest, and the beta face would be southeast.
And if I can back you up on that, the way that the cell site is pointing, what significance does that have relative to where the caller is placing the call in relation to the tower?
Well, for me trying to troubleshoot a problem, I would know that because it was in the alpha face, I know at least where to begin. At least I know it's within that 180-degree sector of that cell site. And then from there, I can sort of narrow down what I have to, when I start digging for my information.
So just to clarify, if the American flag were the cell tower and I were due north of that cell tower, you would expect to see the results that you see here with number 7, meaning it's north facing from where I'm placing the call?
Correct, because you would be in the north face of that tower. That's correct.
As opposed to if the number was 1 or 2, then I would presumably be to the east of the tower?
Well, it's this kind of goes back to the frequency thing that you mentioned earlier about carriers having different frequencies. Each cell site might have 3 or 4 different frequencies depending on what we have in this market. So you might see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, meaning the site had 3 different carriers. This site has 3 different carriers on it, and yes, that would be the north face. Hope I'm not losing anybody.
Sir, what do the rest of the numbers on cell site location mean?
After that, we have the neg 71.0736, followed by 42.34721. Those are the actual coordinates, the Latin long of the site itself and where it physically stands.
So that's longitude and latitude that can be determined by a GPS or even a map?
Correct. Using those coordinates, you could pinpoint where the cell site is.
And what about the remaining numbers, sir?
The last numbers, they really don't pertain to this. That's just more of the angle of the antenna. That's just more for us internally.
And that's the 30 number here?
Yes, correct. That just shows that the antenna itself is 30 degrees, positioned 30 degrees down tilt, but that's...
And sir, from your work, are you aware of the address for this particular cell site?
Off of just looking at it, no. No, we have 3,000 sites here in New England. A lot of them I do know, but a lot of them I don't.
And sir, prior to testifying, did you have an opportunity to help create a more user-friendly form of this particular document that we're looking at.
When you say that again, I'm sorry?
Prior to testifying, did you have a chance to look at and help with the creation of a more user-friendly document showing the cell site locations?
Yes.
Right, approach the witness, Ron.
You may.
Approach the witness, Ron. Have you had a chance to look at that document, sir?
Yes.
And is that document essentially a summary of the records contained in Exhibit 249B, but listed in a way where it combines text messages, voice messages, and data points all chronologically?
Yes, for one specific number.
For the number that we're talking about now?
Correct, yes.
And additionally, sir, does it have cell tower locations as far as at least the listed address?
Yes, correct. They do.
And to the best of your knowledge, again, from being a network engineer in the New England area and in Boston, do those cell site locations appear to be accurate?
Yes.
I ask that the summary document be entered as the next numbered exhibit. I would suggest Exhibit 249C.
Counsel?
No objection.
Thank you. Exhibit 249C.
I've placed Exhibit 249C on the screen, sir. And I'll just go back to the call we were just discussing. July 16, 2012, 2:37 a.m. voice. I believe you've already talked about this. As far as the cell tower location, there's first a line here. What is that cell tower location?
The first one says Boston 285 Columbus Ave.
Now, I'm calling your attention to the fact that the entry we're discussing now appears to have two coordinates for cell tower location. In your experience, what does that mean?
The first cell site information, the 22247, that is the site that the call originated on, and the information below it is a different site, 2179. That is the site where the call terminated. So that just shows movement. It shows that the call originated on one site but ended on another.
So does that indicate that in the 17 seconds of the call that there's movement from one tower to another?
Yes.
And the location of the second tower is what, sir?
Boston 790 Boylston and Exeter Garage.
So just to give an example, before we use the more user-friendly version, just to give you an example of data usage on a phone, I'm going to turn to actually before data usage, let's talk a little bit about text messages. I'm going to turn to page 109 of the records. This is an example of text messaging as captured by AT&T on the records.
Correct.
And the initial entries, sir, are those essentially the same? You have an entry number, you have a date, connection time, originating number, terminating number, IMEI number, IMSI number.
Correct.
What does it mean as far as the description here of in or out?
Whether the user of this particular phone number made an outgoing text or the text came into their phone.
And similar to what we saw on the actual cellular phone calls, do we have reported for each text message either coming in or going out a cell site location?
Yes.
I'm going to call your attention now to an entry we see here, 7/16/2012, 10 in the morning. There appears to be a lot of empty columns. What, if anything, is that indicative of, sir?
It looks like the phone is off network for whatever reason. It just those particular text messages did not go through.
Forwarding it further down to 7/16/2012 from 11 a.m. all the way to 5:13 a.m. Are those similar in that they do not appear to have any type of cell site data attached to them?
Correct.
They also don't appear to have an IMEI number,
Correct. That's what leads me to believe that the phone is off network.
and they also don't even have an originating number.
Correct.
And they're all listed as in. Is that consistent with text messages coming in,
Correct.
but not being received by the phone?
If the phone's off network, it wouldn't go out.
When you say the phone is off network, what are some reasons why a phone would be off network?
Either you shut it off or the battery's died, or maybe you put it into airplane mode, which just shuts down the receiver. Could be a number of different reasons.
But would shutting it off be one reason that it could be?
Yes.
And lastly, sir, before we go to the different version, just want to go over some data usage examples. Placing on the screen Exhibit 249B. And we'll go to 7/16/2012, 2:13 a.m. Originating number. Will all this stay the same even with data usage, sir? Is that
Yes.
true?
Yes, it will.
Now, what about the fact that you see a lapse time of 60 minutes? What does that mean?
Well, the elapsed time is the amount of time that the app was opened. And you can see to the right that there were bytes that went up and down. Those were actual physical data that was that went back and forth from the phone itself.
Again, in layperson's terms, what do bytes up and down mean?
Every time you, when you open up an app, you're starting a data session. So when you open up your app, the clock starts. That's kind of an easy way to put it. As soon as you open up your app, you're using data. You're churning data.
And that the bytes up and bytes down keeps track of that for billing purposes for AT&T?
Correct. A lot of billing plans might have unlimited data. Some might have, 1 gig, 2 gigs, whatever the data plan is. But that's the reason why we track that, is to keep track of the data usage.
And then the other entries, sir, are those similar to what we've seen before, where the IMEI is the unique number identified to this phone, the IMSI is the unique identifying number for the SIM card?
Correct.
An access point says phone. What does that mean?
Means that everything was done through the phone itself. There wasn't any...
As opposed to what? Is there any?
As opposed to using a computer or some other method of data.
And then going to the next category, again, just pointing out the differences between the data entries and the call and text entries. There's a column labeled as description. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
What does that mean?
That just shows that they were all data sessions.
And similar to what we've previously discussed, do the data sessions themselves have cell location data that was captured by AT&T?
Yes, they do.
And similarly, there's the, what I think you said was almost the area code or the zip code, and then the entries that are essentially longitude and latitude, as well as the face of the particular tower that you described. Is that
Correct. That location area code is exactly what you said, a zip code for those groups of towers. That's a good way to put it.
So I'm going to place Exhibit 249C on the screen. And just calling your attention now to 7/15, 2012, 11:35 p.m. Indicates what kind of use of the phone was done at that time?
That was a voice call.
And that's the same number we've been talking about, the 562 number?
562-481-8106, made an outbound telephone call to 860-502-2593. The call was 1 minute and 6 seconds long, and it was an AT&T customer to some other customer, and the call was direct.
And what about the fact that there's 2 towers listed for that phone call?
Looks like the call originated in Southborough, Mass., and it ended up terminating on the Framingham site off of Route 90.
And just calling your attention to the what appears to be data usage prior to that indicates Charlton, Mass. Tower
Correct.
that it's off.
Charlton, Mass., yes, correct.
And then going further back,
Windsor Locks, Connecticut, and Manchester, Connecticut.
I'm calling your attention now to about this entry here, 12:25 a.m. on July 16, 2012.
It was a data session. Again, 562-481-8106 was the user, and the data session started, looks like on the Boston Park Plaza Hojo site, which is at 200 Stewart Street in Boston.
Now, sir, I want to discuss for a moment what appears on this record. Looks like every hour at 1:13 a.m. here, 2:13 a.m., 3:13 a.m., 4:13 a.m., and if you look at the times of those, or not times, but the location, the cell towers for those data sessions on the hour every 13th minute, all indicates being at Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Can you describe what that means and what that indicates?
Objection. Foundation has to acknowledge what that means.
Put the question.
Well, so you're a radio frequency engineer a supervising radio frequency engineer for AT&T, correct?
Correct.
And have you looked into the aspect of data and the usage of data as far as what cell sites will be reflected for AT&T billing purposes?
Yes, correct.
And are you knowledgeable of whether or not there are certain applications that will do something in particular relative to cell sites, meaning they won't necessarily go to the cell site closest to the device?
Objection immediately.
Rephrase.
What is your knowledge, sir, of the use of certain apps on the AT&T network relative to whether or not they will hit the closest tower?
On the older...
Same objection, foundation, as to what happened that night with this telephone. As I understand the question, he's asking some general question about apps. General.
As a matter of course. Is that right, Mr.
Yes.
Hagan? All right, you may answer that, sir, if you know.
What happens on the older 3G network, I guess I need to back up a little bit. AT&T, I'm hoping a lot of you have heard 3G, 4G, LTE. These are all the acronyms that come from the carriers. The older 3G network, which this happens to be, these call records happen to be from, when you opened up an app on the old 3G network, the app would stay running in the background until you closed it. So, now that doesn't mean that you're getting billed constantly, but the cell site itself will try to ping the phone and say, hey, are you still out there? Are you still out there? And that's why you see 60-minute durations, because the phone, that site is just every hour on the hour, it'll just try to ping that phone and say, hey, you still there? So under the 3G network, these 60-minute elapsed times, they can be a little erroneous just because of the older 3G network. Currently, the newer data plans, well, LTE is basically a data-centric network anyway. It's all data. LTE is all data. There's very little voice involved. So now all data is captured in exactly real time on the new LTE networks. So that was just because 3G, the 3G apps were introduced on an older network, and that's the reason why they show up the way they do.
So just to try to break down what you're indicating, sir, so we see 12:13 a.m., and that's actually just after 11:35 p.m., where the tower this device is hitting off of is in Boston. At 12:13 a.m. indicates Connecticut, Windsor Locks, 1000 Old Country Circle, Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Then at 12:25, the tower is again back in Boston, correct?
Correct.
And
so, a phone would never... It's physically impossible for a phone in Connecticut or a phone in Boston to talk to a tower in Connecticut. Does that make sense? So a phone in Boston will never speak to a tower in Connecticut. It's too far away. It's just impossible. And the fact that it's every hour, 1:13, 2:13, 3:13, that tells me that that's basically the cell site asking for information from the phones.
So based upon your training experience, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty as to whether or not the phenomena you described, where your app will keep trying to hit the original tower that you opened it up under, whether that's actually what's applying on these records?
Correct. I'd throw that out.
Objection.
Sorry.
Grounds?
May we approach you?
So referring your attention again back to Exhibit 249C, I believe we left off here with a data point or data usage hitting off of a tower at 200 Stewart Street, Boston, Mass. And the time of that was 2:25 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I believe you already testified about the next entry, which is a voice call. I think we've talked about it extensively, 17 seconds. And that was one that I believe you testified.
Objection, ask and answer.
Overruled.
I believe you testified has two towers it hits off, correct?
It's correct. It shows two towers, the starting tower and the ending tower.
And then as far as the next entry, July 16, 2012, 2:54 a.m. appears to be what type of usage of the phone, sir?
Data,
And what tower location is that hitting off of then?
36 Border Street in Newton, Mass.
Is that, what direction is Newton, Mass from the city of Boston?
That would be west.
And 7:16 at 3:04 a.m.
Also mobile data off of Lexington, Hartwell Ave, Lexington, Mass.
Okay, and the next data point is 3:13 a.m. And again, I think we've testified about those entries. Is that correct?
Yes, I would throw that one out.
And the next entry, 3:15 a.m., July 16, 2012. Again, does that show a certain area of Massachusetts?
Also Lexington, Morgan Road.
And then 4:13 a.m., is that data usage, sir?
Correct.
And the address there is?
Union North, Holland Road, Union, Connecticut.
And the next is a 13, so that's one that you indicated you would throw out.
Correct, yes, Connecticut, Windsor Locks, right.
The next entry, July 16, 2012, 4:44 a.m.
Manchester West, 239 Spencer Street, Manchester.
And I'm going to fast forward now, sir. It's fair to state there's other data usage all appear to be in the area of Connecticut. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And let's go to July 16th, 2012, as of 7:07 a.m. And we're going to go forward to the next page, all the way until 10:27 a.m. There appears to be no tower location for those entries. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And again, what is that consistent with?
Objection has been answered twice.
Is the phone on network in those entries, sir?
It looks like the phone is off network.
All right, that may stand.
And July 16th at 10:47 a.m. Is that a data usage, sir?
Data session, yes.
And-
That's at 700 Maple Ave in Hartford. That's the cell site address.
And just going down for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 entries, does the cell site through both texts and data usage appear to be the same cell site?
Yes.
And then 7/16/2012, 11:06 a.m. I'm sorry, 10:52 a.m. with a voice call.
It's 3 seconds in duration.
And did it hit off of a tower?
No, doesn't look like it went through.
And just to be clear, the first column, that's the originating number, is that correct?
Yes, that is
So that would
correct.
be that number calling the 562 handset?
Correct. 860-977-6418, called 562-481-8106.
And then from 11:06 a.m. until 1:17 p.m.,
Looks like it was off network.
and there's numerous texts that are coming in, but it's off network.
Correct.
And going all the way until 5:13 p.m. on July 16, 2012. Does it appear to be off network until that time, sir?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And then on 5:28 p.m., July 16, 2012, does the phone appear to be on network at this point?
It does, and it looks like, if you could scroll up, or the other way, it looks like all those texts came in at the same time, 5:28.
So in other words, all the texts that had come in between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. that were not received by the phone because it was off network.
When the phone looks like it comes back on.
Well,
What is your opinion?
rephrase the question.
What is your opinion relative to what we've just seen, where there's a series of unreceived text messages coming in, and then you indicate the phone's back on network at 5:28 p.m., and then we see a series of text messages come in? What's your opinion on that, sir?
Well, seeing that they all have the 5:28 timestamp on it, it looks like the phone came on network, and all the text messages that were in queue came flooding in once the phone turned back on, or came back on network.
All right, let's take our lunch recess. We've hit 1 o'clock. We'll resume at 2 p.m.